A national day of mourning as Jimmy Carter has been laid to rest, and all along those lines, I know that Steve Rao is saying that he'll probably be talking about that on tomorrow's World Edition, and I know that Jim Eden may have some conversation around that as well. But at Jimmy Carter's funeral, there was a rare image of presidential unity as the living presidents, including Trump, Obama, and Bush, were there at that particular funeral, and of course there were others there as well, as apparently Trump attended Carter's funeral after meeting with senators on the second term agenda that he's got in mind. And Joe Biden speaks for a vanishing age in the eulogy, praising Jimmy Carter's decency in the remarks that he made and all along those lines. And like I said, I know some folks that were watching the services, and I unfortunately did not get a chance to do it, may do it later and everything, but I'm sure others were watching. I know that definitely Steve Rao told me he was watching, and I'm thinking that maybe even others were watching it as well. So the memorial service apparently heard of humility and integrity amid a hyper-partisan smash mouth political landscape of 2025 is what the article in The Guardian said. Character, character, character. Speaking from the pulpit of a hush Washington National Cathedral on Thursday, Joe Biden seemed to be eulogizing something bigger than the late U.S. president who lay in a stars and stripes draped casket before him. Jimmy Carter's friendship taught me, and through his life taught me, that strength of character is more than the title or the power we hold, Biden said. It's the strength that to understand that everyone should be treated with dignity, respect, that everyone, and I mean everyone, deserves an even shot. As was and was the president was looking beyond Carter's casket to his predecessor and successor, Donald Trump, sitting in the pews as he added, "We have an obligation to give hate no safe harbor and to stand up to what my dad used to say is the greatest sin of all, the abuse of power." So Biden will be departing the White House in 11 days. And perhaps, according to The Guardian, he was mourning not only Carter, the longest living president in U.S. history, who died last month at the age of 100, as he gazed around at former presidents, senators, and congressmen in the cold stone of the Gothic-style cathedral. This particular article is thinking that the 82-year-old great-grandfather also appeared to be speaking for a vanishing age. It was the day the Washington of old made its last stand. So definitely that's some of the remarks that folks are thinking, and all along that lines. And even the article said, and then I'd love to hear Jim's thoughts about it. America might not have had a royal family of its own, but here was the pomp and majesty of a Shakespeare history play, a 2 hour memorial service full of scripture that Carter would have known by heart, heard tributes to the businessman, the Navy officer, the evangelist, the politician, the negotiator, the climate visionary, the author, the woodworker, the humanitarian, the music lover, and the family man. Get heard of decency, humility, integrity, and willingness to put self above service. And like I said, there might have been some partisan things that were going on in the service as well. But I'd love to hear if Steve, I mean, still not Steve, but if Jim watched the service and his thoughts around that line and all along those lines and which way he thinks the politics are going. And I'm going to get to this whole notion about Greenland and whether our president can actually or the president-elect can actually buy that and everything. But did you get a chance? Like I said, I did not. I was watching other things and doing other things in life and everything to watch what was going on in that service. And if so, what were your thoughts around that notion and everything? I see Sasha's with us as well. But like I said, I do know that Steve will be talking about it on tomorrow's show. But I didn't know if you had watched any of the service and if you had any observations. Just one last thing I'll say is I understand that there was some singing of a song that I love, and I think you said that you like it as well. Is it, even though some people say it's an idealistic song, but I do understand that at the funeral they did perform "Imagine," the John Lennon song, and all along those lines. And I think it was a couple of famous singers that did a performance of it. But did you get a chance to watch any of the service from the West Coast?
No, I did not, Mark. I still think it's mourning in America and mourning with the MOURN, because not only is Jimmy Carter to be mourned, but the passing of the decency of the leader of the free world, and what that represented, and what has come to pass has been that decency is seen as weakness, and Jimmy Carter is considered to be a weak president. Of course, what he was someone who didn't play power politics, and also he came from Plains, Georgia, and he never really left. And so he didn't have any of the Washington insiders that would help him grease the wheels of how politics worked in Washington. So he was an outsider in the true sense of the word. And the people that he trusted really didn't know the ways around the halls of Washington, D.C. And, his presidency did suffer from that. But he also had accomplishments, the Camp David Accords, for example. And I think he has earned the respect, especially with his post-presidency life and career, that people cannot really look at that man and say he lacked any kind of character, or he was not compassionate. He was dedicated to human rights and wiping out diseases that plagued others, that didn't plague Plains, Georgia, but plagued others. He cared about other people. And so the turning inward of America has been part of our past and part of our present, and it may be part of our future again, but it's never served us well. Reaching out to help has always been the better way, and what has made America, you can be proud about the country, that's what you can be proud about. The Statue of Liberty says, give us your poor, your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. And, that's kind of the symbol that if you are fleeing whatever situation that you're in, we will welcome you and we'll let you stand on your own 2 feet, live a life of quiet dignity, build a life for yourself, and do it with freedom. Yeah. And so these are the types of things that Jimmy Carter did represent. And I think, again, the turning inwards and the selfishness that's involved with that, self-centeredness, keep people out, don't let anybody else in. This type of thinking doesn't serve America and what's the best of America. But, I can't watch the ceremonies because I have my own personal way of grieving. Thank you, Mark.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense and everything. I was wondering, maybe Sasha watched it from Canada, because I know that that's where he lives at and everything. I was saying that I know that I think Steve will be bringing it up tomorrow, because I think he was actually watching it. But did you watch any of the service, Sasha? And if so, what was your reactions to the service that was going on in the sense of laying Jimmy Carter to rest, the president that didn't make it to 100, and had some folks that loved some of his views and some that were not the biggest fans of his because of certain things that he did while in office? But did you watch any of the service from Canada?
The answer is yes. I watched some of it. Spectacular thing to me is that when we are talking about Jimmy Carter, there are 2 ways of look at him. Number one, as a president, period. As a president, he was considered and still considered to be rather weak. And he didn't do anything fundamentally wrong, but the good things, what he did, there are very few indeed. But what's important is that he was absolutely marvelous human being. And what his example is, while he was again a private citizen after his presidency, he was extraordinary citizen, and his example is absolutely spectacular. And I think that should be emphasized much more than 4 years of his presidency.
Yeah, I agree. He did a lot with Habitat for Humanity and a number of even peace initiatives and things around the world and everything like that. So yeah, definitely it's part of his legacy, in addition to what Jim was saying about him being from rural Georgia and having that rural Georgia kind of background and that Southern spun kind of way of doing things and all along those lines. And Southern as myself, I can relate to some of the ways that Jimmy Carter related to other people around the world and all in that space. But it'll be interesting to see. And I will see, I think I got one other person that came in, if they watched any of the service. I know he was talking about the fires in California and everything. But Rick, you're here. So we got 2 East Coast folks with East Coast, which is me, a Canadian, and 2 from the West Coast. But how are you doing? Did you watch any of the service? That's what we were talking about, the service with Jimmy Carter.
My patience is low because funerals are freaking slow. And I just, I'm like everybody else. I need stuff coming at me all the time. So in our house, I just got home and more than one TV is on with fire coverage. So it's fear porn all day now, where, we watch that, we get worked up. My wife evacuated. I stayed at the house to watch TV and see how close the fire was getting. And, everything worked great last night. Like in terms of, we have a firehouse half a mile away. They got up the worst street in Studio City. It's got this crazy slope that you don't even want to drive up. It makes you feel like your car's going to tip over. Anyway, they made it up there. They knocked down the fire. There was a gas line shooting flames, but they saved it. I mean, not the house, but they saved the neighborhood, and it was like no problem. I mean, I'm sure it was, not easy, but like everything worked the way it should.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Everything along those same lines as still saying on the political front, and maybe not spending, because I know we'll spend some with if Steve does what he plans to do. We just talk about the more of the Jimmy Carter's burial and everything along those lines tomorrow and everything. I do want to, we kind of touched on it this morning, talk about Greenland, and apparently because Ted Cruz is backing the purchase of Greenland, and apparently there are different ways that, even though some people are saying that it's a political theater, that if he wanted to buy Greenland, he could and everything. So I know Politico reported that the president-elect is really determined to control the world's largest island, which is what Greenland is. He could try to buy it outright, and we know he's a transactional person if the autonomous territory declares independence from Denmark. So first they'd have to declare independence from Denmark, and then he could buy it that way. Hold on a second. Or he could seek to make it.
We first tried 150 years ago. At the same time, we bought Alaska. We bought Alaska from Russia. That was crazy too. So, I mean, we like to think that every Trump idea is stupid and crazy. And, if you put your money on stupid and crazy, you'd win more times than not. But, I guess.
But Rick, there's other ways. Rick, there's other ways he could do it too, because apparently he could seek to make it a Commonwealth, which is what Puerto Rico is and everything. Or he could even weave Greenland into a deal like the United States has with Micronesia and the Marshall Islands that basically gives the U.S. military unfettered exchange access.
Well, I mean, we already have access. We got we got the northernmost Air Force base in the world at the top of Greenland. And, Trump Musk came in on like having government do less. How is buying Greenland doing freaking less? If you want to buy Greenland, then talk to U.S. corporations and say, we'll help facilitate some deal where you lease or buy all this wasteland as a place to put your nuclear reactors, to provide the energy to do all the AI we're going to be doing, or some crap like that. I don't know.
Yep.
But I really don't understand why he cannot do anything of it right now without unnecessarily purchasing Greenland. Because if you purchase Greenland, first of all, what's the price? Second of all, who's going to provide financing? What kind of mortgage agreement there will be? So in addition to, it's what, $37 trillion, or it will be another couple of $1 trillion here and there. What's the purpose? I mean, economically, it just doesn't make any sense. Because if Trump wants to put 10 more military bases in Greenland, nobody is going to argue with him. Not do just 10, do 25 bases. So what about 75 bases? Just do as many bases as you can. Do every 2 weeks, open a new base. And then, now, where are you going to take money to do all those bases? That's another question. But maybe Elon Musk will provide financing for this.
I'm Googling to see how much it costs to buy property in Greenland. And, it's tough to find. I don't know that there's much to buy, but I will.
Yeah, well, I don't know who's living in Greenland. Do they have apartments? Do they have things like that? I don't even know who would be living in Greenland. I know they got residents, so they got to be some sort of housing or residency in that area and everything. Hey, Jim, just really quickly, because I know that it was a whole conversation, and there's been a conversation for decades and everything. So, and I know even in other parts of the world, I think that was part of the conversation with the Falkland Islands and everything when London and England invaded them way back when. But how does this Commonwealth principle work? Because I mean, hasn't been Puerto Rico been wanting freedom and wanted to be the 51st state, either that or total independence for decades, even though they don't have that? So
yeah. There are territories and then there are states, and a Commonwealth is more of a British concept. Right. Although there's a Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so it's definitely a term that can mean different things to different people. The idea of annexing another country's property or negotiating a price, and of course, what we would do is issue more debt. There are people that will buy U.S. debt today, tomorrow, and the next day, and Trump. One of the things he says about himself is he's the king of debt, and he won't care about the national debt ballooning if it's something that he wants to do for his own ego reasons. But Greenland is a mess right now. The icebergs are melting. The problems that are there environmentally. It also may contain rare earth elements. There may be some value to owning it. But right now, what it requires is care. And I don't see the Trump presidency as a caretaking operation. I think of it as a profit-making operation. Hi, Shaquille.
Hey, Shaquille.
Happy New Year, Jim. Hope you had a great festive period.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the political things, including Trump wanting to buy stuff. Shaquille, so I don't know if you want to chime in. I'm going to bring up something that I know you love to chime in on because you've chimed in on before. But apparently, a federal case has come out that is a rejection of one of Biden's policies, and Jim might be interested in this as well. But apparently, the judges are rejecting Biden's Title IX rules that would scrap and protection for trans students. So they're saying that it's a victory for women and girls. So the federal court rejected Biden's administration redefinition of sex in the Title IX across the country. So I guess they're trying to say that maybe trans athletes want to have their own teams, that they need to get their own teams and all along those lines. But they are throwing out Biden's quote unquote arbitrary protection for LGBT plus students and everything. So I know that you have some libertarian views and everything, Shaquille, but what is your thoughts around this notion that this ruling has been tossed out? I know you're not a lawyer, but maybe you've got some thoughts around this notion of, whether it's man, woman, or in between.
Look, I don't know what the right solution is for the LGBT community, especially the trans community. I don't know. Some of the arguments, where should they use the bathroom? For goodness sakes, surely we can, allow these people to be able to use the bathroom. In relation to sports and potentially unfair advantages, things like that, I think that needs to have discussion. Personally, I've expressed before that I have some opposition to the way things have been done so far. But the problem is that when the other side of politics gets into power and they sort of throw things out, is, well, what's the solution now, right? Well, what are you going to do now about it? So I don't want to see us turn our backs on the trans community. They need to be treated with dignity and respect. But, I don't know what the future will be, but I certainly hope it'll be something that we can continue to talk about. My fear here is that now that my side has won, my fear now is that there won't be any further conversation about it. It's done and dusted, and that shouldn't be a way forward. I will also pick on my own side here. I'm very upset with Donald Trump. He's talking about taking over Canada. He's talking about taking over Greenland. Where's our offer? We're sitting here in Australia. We haven't had an offer for him to buy us yet. What's going on?
Maybe y'all are too far away, but Greenland's not exactly close.
Well, I mean, he might as well.
You can probably offer. You can probably offer Trump better prices than Greenland. I just looked up Greenland real estate, and the houses there are selling, and condos are selling for like $400,000 American. Even though the average salary.
Yes, so Greenland's an interesting country. It's very pretty up there. I was only there very, very briefly, and I'd like to pop back there. It's an interesting country because it's actually part of Denmark, but it's not part of the European Union. So it's got a sort of interesting kind of relationship, a little bit like the Guernsey, Jersey, those sorts of islands that belong to the UK, but they're not part of the EU. Well, now nobody's part of the EU if they're associated with the UK, but you guys know what I mean. Yeah. So it's a very interesting situation. So my understanding is that if you're a Danish citizen, you're allowed to live and work in Greenland in the same way that if you're British, you can live and work in Jersey, Guernsey, or the Isle of Man. However, if you're from another European Union country, you can't do that. I think they make an exception for the Scandinavian countries or the Nordic countries. But if you're from, France or something like that, well, you don't have automatic rights there. Would buying, I don't know if it's practical for America to buy Greenland. Would it be in the US national interest to buy them? Probably. I'd say probably. Alaska's an interesting purchase that America made. Hawaii, I don't think was a purchase as such. It was sort of more of an agreement between the US and Britain. And Louisiana is another one. So it's not something that the US has never done. Right. But I don't know. I don't know whether to take Trump seriously or whether Trump's just like, I'm just going to upset a few people and see what happens. I think that might be more what he's up to.
I also looked up if Greenland is a sausage party. Like if you move there and you're a guy, are you just going to be getting drunk in a bar full of other drunk guys, or is there a chance there might be a drunk woman in the bar to hit on? And Alaska has 110 guys for every 100 women. Greenland has 107 guys for every 100 women. So it's less of a sausage party than Alaska.
Well, let's see, Rick, I'm not as worried about that because of my good looks and charm and my exotic accent. However, Iceland, from what I remember, will actually pay you to go there and to marry the girls. The problem is it's too bloody cold to get your clothes off. So I'm not sure how happy you would be in either of those countries, Rick.
Instead of Finland, why Trump wouldn't concentrate on buying Aruba? That would be a much greater destination for Americans, and that is very viable. Look at the prices for real estate and other assets in Aruba. That's a juicy proposition.
But there's
surely,
only one problem.
there's only one problem.
Hold a second. There's only one problem.
He could give Vladimir Putin. Sorry, Mark. There was a slight delay.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of like tease Sasha and everything, but if I'm understanding Trump's policies correctly, that could be bad for you because you like going to Aruba. So I could see him buying Aruba and then charging like some sort of entry fee, which is what Nick's been arguing and everything. So as his buying of Aruba, since he's transactional, could be problematic for you because then you might not be able to get to Aruba as easily as you do now because that's one of your favorite destination spots. So that would be my fear in your case, is that he might make it less attractive to you because he might make some additional charges in order for you to get to one of your favorite destinations.
I wouldn't worry about it so much because so far he is very quiet about Aruba. So I wouldn't consider that this is something what will happen anytime soon, at least hopefully not this year, because I'm planning at least another trip to Aruba, maybe even more. But I'd like to mention that to me, all this talk about Greenland and Panama Canal and all other stuff, that's a deflection. It's something what he needs to divert attention from his main purpose of his foreign policy is to have a peace arranged between Ukraine and Russia. Now Trump understand what an undertaking it is. And obviously he is not going to succeed, at least this year, to have a peace there. So now, interestingly enough, a day or two ago, he came up with very interesting thought. I think a lot of people missed it, but I didn't. He is now finding a reason why Putin invaded Ukraine in the first place. He is now taking a theory that Putin, in fact, had the merits to attack Ukraine. He was almost forced to attack Ukraine. There was no way that he could not attack Ukraine, and all that was provoked by Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a culprit of why Russia attacked Ukraine. So now this is a new talk that if Putin is not really guilty of anything, and if he had to do it, so he has two very parties, one weak Ukraine, another strong Russia. So then, from all Trump's point of view, you join the stronger guy against the weaker guy. And that's what I expect will happen anytime soon. And this is why all this process will be derailed and very quickly.
So
And it'll probably work. That idea that Putin had justification, if Trump goes down that path, I think that will probably work. We've discussed this a few times over the years, Sasha. I think that when 9/11 happened, we had wall-to-wall coverage about Osama bin Laden's ideas and why he was doing it. We didn't really get a lot of media coverage and hear a lot of interviews from Vladimir Putin. There's old footage of Nigel Farage at the European Union saying, stop poking the Russian bear. I think that Donald Trump will probably be able to persuade a great many people that Vladimir Putin had justification. Now, the US likes to borrow and spend trillions of dollars. Maybe he can buy Russia. Maybe he can just bribe Vladimir Putin and say, here, you can be the richest person ever. You can beat Elon Musk. Here's $1 trillion. We'll take over Russia. I don't know. But I certainly hope that there's some peace there. Just very quickly, just to go back to the whole idea about purchasing countries, I would question what would happen if they were to buy Greenland, because I think that off the things he's talked about, sort of about Canada, that's never going to happen. Greenland, well, the royal family, obviously, the Crown doesn't want to sell it, but Greenland does actually want its independence. The 50-odd thousand people that live there do want their independence. I would say to them, becoming part of America does not make you independent, but in any case, the question for me would be, what would you do with those people? Do they then become American citizens? Or do they end up with a relationship like American Samoans have? So American Samoans have the right to live and work in the United States. They don't have the right to run for parliament. I think they get to vote. But there is the other part of Samoa, which is not part of the United States, which means that you need to have a visa or an ESTA in order to be able to go and visit family members that live across the border, which means that if you are unfortunate enough to have a drink driving charge or whatever, you punch somebody when you're 18 years old, maybe you can't go and visit your aunt who lives on the other side of the border now, because the other side of the border is the United States. There are some issues with buying countries, but I don't think it's I certainly don't think it's unbelievable for America to do it or for Trump to do it. And as I said, I do actually think it would be in the United States' interest to do it. I just don't know how practical it would be.
Right, so
Something
Mark, you found out
about independence. Just a sec, Eric. I was in the 80s and 90s. I was the musical director on a cruise ship, and very often, like every week, we would visit the island of Antigua. And Antigua just got its independence from UK. And so supposedly they all have to be very happy and dance and have parties and so on, because they're now independent. Privately, though, when I talked to people in Antigua, they were very upset about this independence, because before, UK provided for education, for medicine, for all kind of services. So in a way, it was a civilized little country. Now, with independence, they got poverty. They were children who were jumping, or the passengers were amusing themselves by throwing quarters from the cruise ship, and they were jumping in the water, sometimes 10, 15 meters deep, to get this little quarter. And you know what? I was going on from the boat just take a walk, see what's happening. You know what they were doing? They were playing the video machines, video games with the quarters. And in the meantime, they were hungry. They didn't have anything to eat. So once I went to the shore, and I took with me a few apples, and I wanted to give it to them. No, we don't need apples. Give us quarters. Welcome to independence.
Sorry, Rick.
Okay, so on Monday, Mark found an author who, we're talking about Biden goading, this theory that's probably doesn't hold that much water, about Biden goading Putin to attack Ukraine. But we had an author on who made a pretty good case that Jimmy Carter was kind of a war hawk, and his director of national security, Zbigniew Brzezinski, goaded Russia, the Soviet Union, into invading Afghanistan, which was a disaster for the Soviet Union. That's thing one. Thing two is a business opportunity, maybe for Sasha, who's worked on a cruise ship. There are no strip clubs in Greenland. And in Iceland, strip clubs are illegal. So what you do is you buy a decommissioned cruise ship, like one that, and you fill it with strippers. And you take it to Greenland for like 3 weeks a year, because there's only 50,000 people on the island. And then you take it to just off the international limit, off of Iceland, and you get people getting little tender boats, and they go and so it's a stripper ship, and it just travels the world, giving
in international water.
Jim, you're never going to convince me that there are no capitalists in California. Rick, who loves to get his gear
But
off, is
his
already
capitalist
vying
ideas
for a
have
job
theme.
on this trip.
There's always a theme involved in this idea.
Well, Rick's already vying for a job on Sasha's yacht, and I tell you, I think in my next life I'm going to come back as Sasha. What a fantastic life! He's worked on cruise ships. He's married a beautiful woman, has had beautiful kids, and is a chess grandmaster. I think I'll come back as him. Can I say to you, Sasha? I think the whole thing with Russia and the Ukraine and all of the promises that Trump has made, he's not going to be able to fulfill them all, but I do tend to think that he'll try. I do actually think that. One of the things that is beginning to annoy me a little bit, though, is some of the things that his supporters, friendly fire for me, because it's people, on my side. There's some things I just think you don't need to do. I wasn't particularly impressed when Jill Biden had looked at him, in a friendly way, and then he took that photo and then put it up on as a post. It wasn't necessary. You don't need to do things like that. There's a video at the moment of him talking to Obama, and Kamala Harris sort of glancing over at him and not looking too happy or whatever. Again, you don't need to. You won, right? Leave her alone. Like Hillary Clinton, you won. Leave her alone. It's okay, right? You're the winner. He hasn't done it personally, but some of his supporters have. I think it's unnecessary. Lastly, I'll just talk about what you talked about with what was the country that became independent. I personally, Antigua. So I personally, no secret about this. I know lots of royal family members from royal families across the world. I don't make any secret of it. I'm a Republican to my core. I'm not talking about American politics. I'm talking about Republican as in the idea of people being able to control their government. You can't be a Democrat without being a Republican. It's a core value as far as I'm concerned, that the right to rule the country belongs to the people and not to a particular family. So I would love to see Australia become a republic. I'd love to see Canada become a republic. I'd love to see the UK become a republic from itself. And Australia are actually republics. They're just not quite there yet because of the symbolic head of state. And since we've declared more for independence in the 80s,
Jack, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah.
to tell you, I'm really unhappy. I prefer fundamental.
He will break up a little bit there and everything. Did you say
I think there's a new threat to republicanism, which is AI, which is, AI is going to be the new ape, and people who are good at using it, they're going to be smarter than people who don't, and therefore they're going to figure out how to have leverage over the rest of everybody. which is anti-democratic.
And it's always been
Yeah.
that way, though. Whatever novelty comes across, those people who own it control more than the people who don't.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
The AI is going to be it's the wild, wild west. We don't know what the rules are, and I know I'm not a gunslinger anymore, so I'm trying not to fight any battles AI related. The idea here that we're talking about, I think we all agree that allowing the people to have a voice in how they are governed is a more civilized way of running a country. And that isn't the case in Russia. And I do think that, there are things that we have to stand for, and that is freedom.
Yeah.
And
Freedom along those lines and everything. Hold on a second.
Am I back now? Am I still breaking up? Am I back?
Yeah, you sound
Yeah.
good now.
Yeah, so I'll just say that although Australia, by and large, is a republic, but not in reality, but theoretically, we pretty much operate as a republic. I would actually refer us to go back to being part of the UK, not because I don't believe in republicanism anymore, but because we don't have a Bill of Rights in this country. And it's very unclear whether the Magna Carta and other, theoretical constitutional rights that the UK has actually applies to us here in Australia. So I think when people want their independence, that's great. But in my opinion, you do need to have a system for all of its flaws, similar to the US, where people have the right to restrain government. Again, I think the US has many flaws, and government oversteps the mark in many ways. And Jim, you talked about freedom. People should have freedom. Abortion is a hot button issue in the United States. It was a Republican position before. Republicans were always the position, hey, it's a woman's body, they get to choose. And now all of a sudden they've changed their mind. So all sorts of different freedoms, you're going to have the legislature change things along the way. But I do think we need to respect the freedoms of individuals. And certainly we should be promoting the family unit as the core part of society.
And what has happened?
Hold on a second. I'm going to have to actually challenge you on that and everything, because in my understanding and studying politics, it was actually the moral majority and some of the other that was the fringe elements of the Republican Party that were more in favor of this notion of women not having the rights to their body, and were very much pro anti-abortion. There was definitely a strong Republican anti-abortion movement within the Republican Party. So I would actually challenge you on that.
The biggest
that's not what history shows.
Trump is the evangelical Christian base. They went out and brought broader numbers for Trump than anyone else, and they're a solid voting bloc, and that's one of their key issues. That's a very high motivating. So we have to be careful with history, because the Ku Klux Klan was democratic in its origin, but it was a Southern thing. And when the civil rights movement happened, all of a sudden Southerners went Republican. Now, so we toss around the labels a little bit too liberally, and we can use historical facts incorrectly in the present.
That I would agree with. Hey, just really quickly, Jim, I did have a question for you, because I was going to mention it because it does come back to politics and another thing that we talk about a lot and everything. I think even Shaquille has brought it up. And I know that I've had some friends that some that are big fans of it, some that are not big fans of it. But apparently this judge ruling that has to do with Title IX was talking about this use of pronouns and names that match the student's gender identity, because they're saying that when teachers are being asked to use pronouns and names that match a student's gender identity, it's actually violating their constitutional right to free speech and everything. But I know a number of people, including some that are on this network, that will use the term he, him, her, he, him, or whatever the different ways of she and her, and a number of ways of using the pronoun stuff. And I know freedom is a big part of your life and everything. So I just wanted your thoughts around, and maybe Shaquille's got some different thoughts, but your thoughts around the use of pronouns and the importance of the use of pronouns, and whether it should be even an issue, because it has been one that's been out there for a number of years, both in the corporate world as well as in the education world.
So there's a race, a term we can't use anymore. It comes from Brer Rabbit, which is, and it's tar baby.
Right.
And it's now got racial connotations. But the idea of a tar baby is, I guess you put the baby someplace and then somebody comes along and goes, ooh, a baby, but it's made out of tar, and you pick it up and then you're just stuck in a wad of tar.
But
and trans issues, in my mind, are a tar baby that you put it out there, and then it's designed to tangle the Democrats and in stances that the Republicans can use against them.
I think there's a big part. I think a big part of this, though, is that, or certainly during my lifetime, growing up in the 80s, and then obviously being in high school in the 90s and early 2000s, teenagers and young people were more prepared, although a little bit of trepidation, but they were more prepared to come out and say, "Hey, I'm gay." I think with the trans issues, it hasn't gone through that same sort of fight, people being arrested for having sex and things like that. And I think that there's been perhaps what feels to people on my side an over promotion of these ideas in a way that parents say, "Hey, let's not confuse the kids," etc. And I think that's a big part of the issue. The other thing I'll say is that there are TikTok videos and Instagram photos and things like that of these trans flags and pride flags in American classrooms, but not the American flag and stuff like that. That's going to upset a few people. I think when it comes to pronouns, out of politeness, you would generally call somebody by the pronoun that they would prefer. People are obviously more used to he, she. People are more these days, I think, are more accepting of they, them. I think when people start talking about neo-pronouns, or they start talking about, demon self and clown self and God self and all this sort of stuff, look, most people are not going to go with that. When people start identifying their gender as being a cat or stuff like that, people aren't really going to go for that. And now you're hearing people talk about pronouns that can't be. Jeffrey Marsh the other day was talking about pronouns that you can't pronounce. What's the point of this? I'm busy. I've got stuff to do. If I'm going to employ you, I don't want to.
The left is definitely needed to be slapped in the face a little bit about pushing some of that too hard. But I think you make a good point. It used to be that the homosexual population was afraid because they were in a minority. And not only did they go through struggles to be recognized, but they found out that there was an awful lot of them. And there was strength in numbers. And that's not the case with the trans community, at least not yet. So they're a powerless, voiceless minority. And so there is some overcompensation just to be heard at all. So, all of this stuff is going to wash itself out because it's not as big an issue as we are making it. People that are, the people have come down, they know they're just confused and they just need therapy or to be talked to like be a man. We used to say that, that there's gay fixing therapists out there. The thing is that we need to meet people where they're at and accept them for who they are. And how they want to identify themselves as much as possible, out of politeness, you just simply will accept them as they are, as they present themselves. And there's no reason to try to force them into a box that you think is better for them. These are things that the society will work on and will sort out. But there's going to be.
I like that. I like deflecting from there. Say the trans people have a right to live their lives, but let's not waste time let's talk more about the issues that affect 100% of the American people. That's what they did in the debates. Nobody answered the question. They went to what they wanted to talk about, and I'd like to see more of that instead of freaking getting all tangled in the tar bait.
I think one of the issues is certainly from the small business community, right? The mum and dad that just have a cafe or a restaurant or something like that, is they don't want there to be a problem. So somebody comes in, applies for a job. You don't want to be constantly walking on eggshells, and I think a lot of people feel that way. Now, that feeling may be, maybe unwarranted or unjustified, but I think that is a big feeling that people have talked about. And with cancel culture, it's like, well, if I say the wrong thing, if I say the wrong thing as an 18-year-old, it could affect me when I'm 40. We need to get away from that. And I think the next generation has actually talked about that a lot. There's less bullying from the next generation. So, look, this will work itself out, and I certainly hope it does. One of the other things I'll just quickly say is that I think a lot of young people are being forced to celebrate that community, and I don't know why. My opinion, and I know that society has obviously changed since I was a young person, but my opinion has always been, I don't care what you do in your bedroom. That's your business. Now, if you want to share it with me over a couple of drinks and we can have a laugh and talk dirty, fine. But otherwise, what you are doing and who you're doing it with, what happens between consenting adults, that's your business. And I'm not going to judge you for it. You be you, right? So, I mean, what's that case I've talked about before, West Virginia or Virginia, I can't remember off the top of my head, Board of Education versus Barnett, which was Jehovah's Witnesses who had said that they shouldn't be required to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, that perhaps should also apply to young people who don't want to, pledge allegiance to the Pride, movement. People should be allowed to say, yeah, I'm not going for it, I don't believe it. And then you can choose whether or not you want to hang around that person or not.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Hold on. Trans and non-binary characters have become a cheap and lazy way for producers to make their TV shows and movies look a little bit hip. That you make like the 5th biggest character, you make them trans or gender fluid, you throw them in there, you don't really mention it, but they're there, in a lot of scenes, and it says, look, here's our trans cred.
Remember Soap?
Yeah, I definitely remember some
character.
But like, there's a show
I
called.
remember some of the other ones, like MASH had a gay character and everything. I was going to tease you, Rick and Shaquille and everything, but I will make a slight statement to what you said, because I agree with you, Shaquille, that you don't care what people are doing in their bedrooms as long as they're not targeting certain groups. Like if you're messing with children, I got an issue. And if you're messing with animals, I got an issue. But outside of that, what you do in your room is on you and everything. But I was going to say, Shaquille,
well, I did say consenting adults.
Consenting adults, yes.
So you just say consenting adults. But I was going to tease you and everything, because I know that you really identify as a bicycle. And I know that secretly Rick is really a furry and everything along those lines. So you can go ahead and admit it, Shaquille. You're identified as a bicycle. We know you're identified as a bicycle, and we know that Rick is really a furry.
Rick is a furry.
Mark, if you think I'm a bicycle, let me disabuse you of that notion straight away, because when I come to North Carolina, there's no way in hell that you're going to ride me, baby.
I went to a furry convention for a TV show. We went there hoping, I didn't realize when I was given this assignment that the producer really wanted to get into furries. Like they like wearing furry outfits while they bang each other. It's like a sexual thing. But the deal is, if you walk in with a camera crew, they're going to clam up about the sexual dimension of what they do.
Rick,
without the sex, like furries are freaking bored.
Rick, your preoccupation with sex, I think, has taken you to some very weird and wonderful places during your lifetime.
It wasn't my preoccupation. It was the producers and the shows. They wanted the sex.
He was forced to tag along.
He wasn't consenting, Jim. He wasn't consenting. Somebody in California will have to do something about that. Yeah, I do want to just quickly come back on something that he said before, though, in relation to trans characters in movies and shows. Now, I don't imagine that you guys are big fans of Squid Games. You're not quite the age group demographic that was directed at, but I certainly loved the first season.
The first season.
Yeah, the second season, firstly, I was disappointed because I don't think the storyline was a great one. I think there was a lot of side stories that just weren't completed. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers for our audience, but there is a trans character in it that I think the story is a little bit too dominated by that character, and it's in a way that's not particularly relatable. And so I was watching it with some friends of mine, and a couple of them said, look, everyone's here, everyone's there in Squid Games, so they've got these, terrible financial issues and all these things that are going on with them. And then we've got this one guy who wants to chop his dick off, and that's why he's there. And I was like, yeah, that sounds a bit harsh, but, that kind of maybe makes a little bit of sense. So I rang a couple of my trans friends and said, what do you think? Like, how do you feel about this character? And to my surprise, actually, most trans people that I know said, look, we do want visibility, but we could just be part of the show without the storyline being about us.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Hollywood probably gets it a little bit wrong. And I think for Squid Games, it wasn't necessary, but also it was very American. South Korea really isn't into this yet, right? It's like Africa. They're not there yet. They might become there in 20 years or 50 years or whatever. They're not there now. And it really feels like it was American Netflix saying, you need to do this. And Asia is very, very conservative in a big part of Asia. It's very, very conservative. So it just didn't make sense.
No, but Shaquille, that's across the board, because one of the things that I am not a big fan of, contrary to what some people may believe in and everything, is this notion of tokenism and all along those lines. And there's definitely been a lot of tokenism in even the portrayal of African Americans and stuff for decades, in wanting to put somebody in because you want to have the quote unquote hood character, or you want to have the quote unquote intellectual African American, like the Cosby type and everything. And there have been other ones as well. I mean, I love Hogan's Heroes and I loved MASH, but I remember in the early days, and Jim, I'm sure you remember this and everything, in the early days, they literally found, even though there was a significant amount of black soldiers, they went and found one black soldier because they felt that they needed to have that character. Then was it about representation? It was about just putting what character in there that was more of a
I think to the core. I think to the core of that issue. I mean, I've talked before about The Little Mermaid. Right. Look, that actress did a fantastic job, and she really did. But I just don't think it was necessary. And what I would say is that there are so many stories that, the history of people who are African American, the history of people of color. There's so many stories that we could tell. Now, the great stories, David Copperfield, or all the stories that we talk about, where we have kids, dress up as chimney sweepers and all that sort of stuff. Those are great stories, but they're white stories, right? They're predominantly British stories, but we also talk about like Annie and stuff like that. We talk about sort of old American or early European stories.
Well, there are some ways from Aunt Jemima. So
exactly. So there are great stories that we can tell, and I would say don't just go back and take the old stories and then replace them with a person of color. Tell new stories. There's a lot of material there. There's a lot of inspiration there. Tell new stories and give them representation that way. My concern is that we're going into a world now that a lot of people really can't relate to. I think that mixed race couples and mixed race children, I think, are gorgeous. However, not every person in America is mixed race, but if you had to decide what the demographic of America looks like based on what you see on TV, it's like every advertisement, every show consists of a mixed race couple. You don't need to do that. I think you're overdoing it a little bit.
But there's money in that, because if you throw a mixed race couple in, then you get to hit two demographics for the price of one couple. And you get to seem a little modern.
But Rick, is there money in it? We know that Hollywood is certainly not making the sort of money that it was making before, and there's been a bit of a backlash that's been brewing for many years.
I'd say that bank commercials are the biggest at having biracial couples. A couple walks in, they're looking for a home loan, and they're two different races, and nobody met, and I feel like that, bank commercials are weirdly abstract anyway, because you're not selling a car, you're selling services. And So you got to I don't know. I just think they're trying to squeeze in one more message.
I know what they're trying to do, but I would argue that perhaps it's being done to such a great degree that it's now becoming not effective anymore. In the movie Time to Kill, where the white lawyer and the black family finally meet and their kids play together, that's a lot more inspirational. Now, if you then wanted to make a Time to Kill 2 and those kids got together and had a relationship when they grow up, cool. But to put that in every single thing that you do, I just think it's problematic.
I watched a movie.
It's been commercial just a couple of days ago, and there were two white people, a man and a woman. And I looked at it and I asked,
Wow.
Mama, what's happening here? Who's a black girl or a black man?
There's one more thing that I love.
The horror section.
There's one thing I love in spotting in commercials, which is the couple or the person who sets off gaydar, but not so much that straight people realize it. It's the really quick clip of what could be a gay couple if you're gay and looking for it, but if you're straight, it goes over your head. That to me is fantastic.
I watched.
I think that's sorry.
My brother-in-law got me to watch a movie over Christmas that I wasn't on my radar at all. It's a 1948 movie starring Danny Kaye, and what it was that Danny Kaye played this musician academic, and he was collecting all of his musician. And these two window washers heard them playing and talking, and they came in and they told him about jazz. And now the window washers were right out of Amos and Andy, very stereotypical. And but then they went to Danny Kaye, the character, went to all these. The soundtrack to that was phenomenal. They, Satchmo was there, all sorts of people that were legends now, but they were pretty unknown at the time, in 1948. And but they couldn't help themselves but present the blacks in a overly stereotypical.
Yeah, they can be over stereotypical.
One of the places where I think this gets a bit silly, and I'm going to pick on my American friends. We all know how much I love and adore the United States, but there's a show, I think it might be NCIS or CSI or whatever, Sydney or Australia or whatever. Now, I've never watched the show. I don't watch an awful lot of TV. They had to have a person of color in it. So do you, A, choose like a First Nations Australian or something like that? Or do you B, pick an African-American to put in there? It just doesn't make sense to put the African-American in, which is what they did. Not because Australians are anti-African-American, but it's an Australian show, right? This is where I'm saying I just think there's an element of unreality
There's also the element of trying to cover more than one element, because I know that sometimes they put in a character because they can get more than one figure within that. So they'll get somebody that is gay, black, old, and they'll be basically trying to cover as much of the. It comes out of kind of like even what they did do.
If you've ever seen Tropical Thunder,
they're trying to get everybody. They're trying to get somebody representing multiple segments of society, and they will do that.
But again, it's not necessary. Any of Green Gables, right? Which I hated reading that. I can't believe my mother and my school made me read that when I was a kid. God, it was dreary. Oliver Twist I can kind of go with, but I'm not reading any of bloody Green Gables. But if you're going to make a movie of that, let's just keep them white. And if you want to tell a similar story about the way blacks grow up or whatever, then tell that story. And look, we've made musicals about pretty horrible things that kids have been through in the past. We should be able to do that with things like slavery, with things like what happened with blacks when they first were emancipated, and some of the hardships that they have. We should be able to do that. I feel like we're not, and I feel like what we're doing is essentially black-facing old white stories. That's not really, in my opinion, showing respect to the history and culture that created this.
But that's only a segment. There is some serious work that's being done out there too. We can't, use too broad a brush here. But Hollywood is known for its successes, and it's not an ideal for setting a standard or lifting society up. It can, but it doesn't hit the heights very often. It swings and misses quite a bit. So
there's been a couple of those. I mean,
They need to
Hamilton
put
did
us
that
in
to some
charge,
degree.
Jim. They need to put us in charge. We've got a writer in Rick Rosner. Put us in charge, and yourself, but I'm not sure the chess movie's that good. So we put us in charge, especially me, and we'll fix the world's problems straight away.
That sounds like a plan. I like that plan and everything. And we're going to wrap up this show because I got the other show going.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
let y'all know and everything along those lines. And you'll enjoy this, Rick, and even Jim and Shaquille. I know Sasha bounced and everything, but I've actually earlier today had to do some rehearsals because a dear friend of mine who used to work with Joy DeLucas is doing a musical about the freedom and world peace, IPC. You can find him on Instagram. We had me doing voiceover work. I'm actually maybe adding acting into my repertoire of things that I'm doing as well because he wants me to play some character. I think it's supposed to be like some little character out of the Matsu and everything. So I won't be playing myself. I think I'm supposed to be playing some sort of animal. I think it's an elephant and everything like that. So I'm
You're a furry.
I'm gonna tug at the heartstrings of my Californian friends, Jim and Rick. I'm gonna be setting up a GoFundMe for myself because I haven't paid. The reason I wasn't on the investment show yesterday, I didn't pay my bill, which I didn't think was going to be a particularly big deal. But Ema hasn't been working either, so I didn't pay that. But I was overseas over the Christmas break. My credit card expired while I was away, and I just assumed that it would, continue on. But they changed my credit card number, so the direct debit didn't come out, so it's disconnected. And so I'm going to just tell everyone that I'm broke and set up a GoFundMe and just see how I go with it. I think.
We're tapped out. We're too busy doing the GoFundMe for all the people we know who don't have houses anymore.
Yeah, and I am very, very sorry about that. We've heard a lot about that here, and obviously Australia has bushfires all the time. So
you guys,
really hope you guys.
All your koalas.
You're going to put in world politics. Y'all can sit around and talk to them.
But I certainly have my thoughts and prayers for the people of California who are affected by this right now, and I'm glad to know that you guys are okay.
The maid of honor at our wedding had lost her home.
It's ready to bring down the room.
Yep. And on that note, we're ready to get on out of here. But I enjoyed this conversation. We touched on a lot of things, including politics and entertainment. So it was fun.
All right.
I'll catch y'all later.
Bye-bye, Mark. Bye, guys.